Hi, this is Arndt von Königsmark, and in this video I'd like to show you the plant kits from Laubwerk, which is a quite nice system to add some realistic trees to your 3D projects. And you can find them by clicking on the plugins for Cinema 4D menu here in our web shop, and there you can find the Laubwerk Plant Kits. There are 5 different kits in total. By clicking on these menu items, you will see that you get some preview images here, and also if you're going really all the way down, you can also have some test renderings some users did. So you can see that's a pretty nice system. So I would like to give you a short demo of how to use these plant kits. It's important to know that these plant kits not only include just simple 3D models, but these are more or less parametric objects. So you can control them by using a special plugin. So that's why you do an installation before. So after the installation is done of such a plant kit, you can see that we now get a menu item here, a new one called Laubwerk. And there you can find the Laubwerk browser. Beside that, there's also a plant object there, but that's basically an empty tree object to start with. So you have to fill this object with one of the trees loaded in the Laubwerk browser. So I think it's better to choose a Laubwerk browser first to save a couple of clicks when you like to add new trees to your project. So you can see this Laubwerk browser works quite the same as a content browser built into Cinema 4D. So you get some nice icons for all the trees and all the plant kits. Of course, the number of trees depends on the number or the amount of plant kits you have installed. Each plant kit has about 10 trees, different trees. Each of the trees has or is available in 3 variations. Each of these 3 variations has 3 different ages, so from a very young tree to a fully grown tree. And you can also change the seasons for the tree. So in total you get about 360 variations with each plant kit. So that's quite a bunch of different models. And beside that, you can control also the level of detail, as we will see in just a minute. So regarding these icons, you can see that we have some small slider here on the lower left, where you can just size them up or down a little bit. And while hovering with your cursor above one of the images, you can see that you get some additional information about this specific tree here. So that's quite nice, just to get the idea where normally this kind of tree would grow. So in which country they are more common. And you can also see in the lower part of this window there are some information about the size you can expect of this kind of tree. So first thing you would do, of course, is to browse the existing tree files here and maybe decide to use this one. So you can add this tree now to your scene by double clicking, but before that you should have another look at the settings here in the lower right regarding the materials used with this tree model. This is quite important because Laubwerk supports 2 different kinds of renderers. So of course the Cinema built-in renderer, so that's called the standard renderer, the advanced renderer, and also the physics render built into Cinema 4D. But you can also choose to render with V-Ray. So V-Ray of course uses its own material system and its own render algorithm. So it's important that you have a thought about that before you start adding trees to your project, what kind of renderer you would like to use later for the final rendering. So with this preset active render, this means that you already have chosen the renderer you would like to use for the final rendering. So the tree expects that you already have chosen the right render within the render settings. So as you know, you can choose standard or physical render, or if you have this installed, of course, the V-Ray renderer by choosing the V-Ray Bridge plugin here. So whatever you have chosen here with this active render setting, all the materials are based on the setting which within the render settings. Beside that, you can also choose to add standard materials, which is the normal Cinema 4D material, or of course a V-Ray advanced material. So these two options come in handy when you haven't chosen the right renderer already here in the render settings before adding the trees. The second setting is about the quality of the textures used in the material. So you can see that we have three different options here from low, medium to high. And these control basically the resolution of the textures for the leaves or for the bark used on the branches, for instance. So with the low setting, you basically just get a color. So there's no texture used in the materials. But this is perfectly fine if you use the tree just in a decent distance from the camera. So if it's all the details just are too small to see any texture anyway. So this is quite nice to save up some memory or some RAM while rendering. If you're more in the mid to close up area, you would like to choose medium to high, which of course then uses textures for all the leaves and so on. So basically, this is all you have to choose here. You can also choose existing layers or add a new layer for organizing the trees and the materials. But this has, of course, nothing to do with the quality of the materials or the tree itself. So this is something you can do also later on. So adding the tree is done by double clicking. And in this case, I would like to use at least a little bit of texture resolution, so I'm using the medium quality, and I double click on the tree I would like to use. So in this case, coral wood. So by closing the browser, you can see that we now have sort of a tree in our scene, but this of course looks nothing like the preview image from the browser. But this is the default level of detail for the editor, just to keep things fluently and to speed the navigation up. So it's not always necessary to see every individual leaf, of course. This still gives you a good idea about the size and the orientation of the tree itself. But of course, we have additional settings. So you can just select this tree object here, and you can see that we get some settings here in the attribute manager beside the preview image to give us an idea about the final rendered tree. You can see, for instance, that we have a switch for the editor mode, and this one is responsible for the limited amount of detail we see here right now, because this is just a convex hull for the editor. You could choose to increase the quality by switching to skeleton. So skeleton means that we now get a quite nice representation of all the leaves. In this case, the placement of the leaves, so not the actual shape of each leaf. But this kind of point cloud already works quite well to really show us the shape of this tree and how dense the leaves would be later on. If you like to see really the final amount of detail, you have to switch to render geometry for the editor mode. And you can see this takes a couple of seconds to update all the polygons and the information. You can see that now we get 750,000 polygons here. So this is a quite hefty tree already, but of course sometimes you just need this amount of detail for close-ups. If this is something you would like to use maybe on a side of an image and you would like to be very close up with the camera, you can see that we really get all the amount of detail even for close-ups here. But this is just the editor mode. You can see that we have a separate switch for the render mode. So it's no problem to stick with skeleton, for instance, just to have the idea where we could expect leaves later on, and stick with the full geometry for the render mode. So whenever you hit render, you then of course will get the full detail of the tree again with all the polygons we have seen here before. You can see this takes a couple of seconds to update the mesh, and then while rendering you can see all the full amount of detail. The second render mode is about a convex hull, you know already. So this kind of shape can be used for rendering as well. In this case, the editor mode is grayed out, so you can not control the editor mode itself manually. So it will be the same for editor and rendering. So let's see what else do we have. Of course, we have some menus here on top about adding variations. So you can see that every tree has 3 variations, variant 1, 2, and 3, and each of these variations is available in 3 different ages. So the young tree, the middle-aged tree, and then the fully grown tree. So fully grown is of course the tallest tree, as you can see here, and the youngest tree is of course the smallest of the 3. But even if we use the young tree and switching to the second variation, you can see that it really looks very different. So this makes it possible to use the same tree over and over again and add enough variation so it doesn't show too much of a repetition while rendering. You can, of course, rotate them a little bit and rescale them a little bit and choose between these different variations over here. Beside that, you also have a switch for the seasons. So whenever you change the season, you can see that in this case, because it's a more tropical kind of tree, the color of the leaf is changed by this. With more European kind of trees, let's say if you would like to exchange this tree, you just click on this image so the browser opens up again. And let's see if we can find something more common in Europe, like this one maybe. So we would like to replace everything. And we switch to winter, and you can see that most of the leaves are now gone, because it's typical for our winter time that the trees will not have any leaves. So by switching these seasons, you can see that we get quite a nice amount of variations as well. Beside that, you can see that even when we are, let's say, in summertime, we have a switch for the leaf density. So with this, you can control the amount of leaves you would like to have. So maybe, let's say we have the full geometry visible here, which makes it a little bit easier to see what's happening. Let's say we would like to use this tree in the foreground, but it's covering up too much of a an important building in the background because of the leaves. So you're just lowering the percentage here to get rid of half of the leaves, as you can see here. So this is quite nice to get more space between the leaves. Another nice thing we have, of course, by reducing the leaf density, you can see that we can save up quite a lot of polygons. So switch back to 100%. You can see that we have now about 160,000 polygons. And by reducing to half, we now have 115. And we can go lower and lower and lower. And you see we now have just about 90,000 polygons left. So, of course, we would like to use this kind of density with trees that are more in the back of our scene, so they don't use up so much memory for all the polygons. But on the other side, we now get a lot of space between the leaves, and that's why we have a nice second switch for this in the detailed setting, and this is called the leaf amount. The leaf amount is more or less a scale factor for the leaves. So as you can see now, this is the original size of the leaf, so 100%. If we go down with this leaf amount, you can see that this scales up the leaf shape. So let's say we have 20% amount of leaves. We just use the same number here. And if we would be in a decent distance, the tree would be covered in about the same amount of greenish leaves as if we would stick to 100% leaf density. So this is quite nice to get down the overall polygon count. Of course, you can adjust this value independently from the leaf density value here. So just to get the look you like to have while rendering. So this is quite nice to adjust the amount of details with your tree. Another thing about the tree detail is about the branches, of course. So let's say we are more in the winter time, so we have a better idea about the amount of detail we get alone from the branches. You can see that there are very fine branches at the end, so they are really connected to the leaves, which looks quite nice in close-up, of course, but maybe it's a little bit too much of a detail for trees that are further away from us. So this is some detail we can also control by switching over to the Detail tab. You can see that we have two switches here we can use to limit the amount of branches. The first one is about the thickness of the branches. So by switching this on, you can see that all the small branches are now cut off. So it's using this value here to cut off all the branches that are thinner than this 1 centimeter. So you can adjust this further and further. You can also use in between values, so you can cut somewhere along the branches and cut off the thinner end of all the branches just to save up quite an amount of polygons again. The second option we have is about the branch depth value. So the depth value is some sort of level, as you can see here already. So the first branch is of course here the main stem of the tree, and from here on we have other branches and then they split again and again and again. And each split is one death. So when we switch on this use option, we can choose what kind of branch we would like to have. So with just one branch level, we only get the main branch of the tree, then the side branches, and then the sides at the side branches, and so on. So we can go into the finest details and the finest branches. Of course, you can also do a combination of both options. So you can really have the amount of branches you like to have, but cut off at a decent position. So whenever you feel that these smaller branches or twigs don't add up any detail to your rendering anymore because the tree is too far away. So that's about the amount of branches. Each branch, of course, has also some polygons, some subdivision. So that's what this subdivision menu here is about. So let's switch over to something that uses lines to give you a better idea about the subdivision we can expect. So by lowering this value to 0, this is the lowest possible setting, you can see that every branch originally has just 4 polygons in a loop. So it's basically more or less a box-like shape. So this might be still okay for trees in a distance. You will not notice that it's more like a box shape. But if you're more close up, of course, it will show the shadowing, and the shading on the surface might look a little bit odd. So by increasing this to 1, you can see that the main branch is now subdivided by 1. So this is the subdivision is quite similar to what the subdivision surface object does. So it's not only adding new polygons, but also smoothing or rounding the shape, of course. But this rounding is only for the main branch. As you can see here, we have the first side branch. This is still just a box shape because we're just smoothing the first level. So by increasing to the second level, also this branch will be smoothed, but the next one, this is the third level, is still a box shape. I hope you get the idea. So you can walk up the branch levels one by one, increasing this value, and you can see that this adds up more subdivision to the larger trunks or branches and less detail to the smaller branches. The second mode is called uniform. Let's switch back to 0 again before we start the uniform mode. So again, we start with just 4 polygons for each branch. And now we switch over to 1. You can see that the main branch is subdivided, but also all other branches. So uniform smoothes out every kind of branch, even the smallest one. So by using uniform, you should really take care to cut off the smallest branches, as you will end up with quite a high amount of polygons in this mode if you have all the small twigs as well. So this is about the branches. Do we have something else? Yeah, of course, we have the document scale here as well. So this is maybe important if you are using a different kind of scale factor for your scene, and if you have to scale the tree up or down maybe. So by decreasing this value, let's say 0.5, the tree is scaled up. So it's now 2 times bigger than normally the tree would be. That's how it works. But if you are, of course, using one-to-one aspect ratio or scale for all the buildings and landscapes and so on. You can just stick to the document scale, and everything will fit perfectly. Do we have something else? Let me see. I think we have covered all options already. Regarding the materials, these are just regular materials, so you can of course go into all the settings, adjust the bump, maybe even add additional channels, let's say for backlight shading. So in this case, let me just get rid of the unused materials first, and then select all the leaf materials, and maybe just the green leaves materials makes more sense to be a little bit more specific about the color. Tick the luminance channel and maybe add the backlight shader. You can find it in the effects shader, which is a little bit off the screen right now for you, but I think you already know this kind of shader. So this is called backlight shader, and of course you would like to use a color which is close to the original surface color of the leaf. Maybe adjust the amount of illumination a little bit and the shadow density, and by rendering this, maybe in combination with a light source, of course, a physical sky maybe. Let's choose some summertime setting here and having a view against the direction of the sun, and maybe navigating a little bit closer so we can have a look at the effect. We should see by rendering that now the leaves are not perfectly black on their backside, but show the amount of green color that we just configured with the backlight shader, and we will also see some shadows coming through the leaves from other leaves on the top of the tree. So this might help adding some more realistic shading, especially if you don't like to use global illumination to light your trees. So basically that's about it already. You can see it's pretty much straightforward to use the trees. Regarding the placement of the trees, you can use Simograph, of course, because the tree object has its origin near the base, so it's quite easy to place copies or render instances of these trees, maybe on a landscape object or some other kind of object, or maybe along a spline if you need some trees along a street, for instance. So thank you very much for watching. I hope this was a little bit helpful to get the idea about the Laubwerk Plant Kit and how this works inside of Cinema 4D. Take care.